They called me a broke grease monkey, laughed when I ordered rice without meat, and said I wasn't good enough for the girl who slipped kindness onto my plate. 2 days later, those same people told me she was dead. That was the second my whole life tilted, and I stopped pretending who I was. My name is Henry Williams. Yes, that Williams, but don't turn this off yet. I didn't start this story with a mansion. I started it in a one-room apartment with a leaky faucet and a window that rattled whenever the night trucks rolled by. Every morning I walked to Gideon's Auto Repairs, hands already stained with the ghost of yesterday's oil, and I worked the way my father taught me before there was money in our name, with my head down, listening more than I talked. I could have been upstairs in some glass office doing deals and sipping something expensive, but I was tired of being loved by receipts. I wanted to find someone who looked at me and saw a man, not a headline, so I hid the suits, sent the driver home, and let the bus announce me like everybody else. You ever try to disappear in plain sight? It's the fastest way to learn who kicks down and who lifts up. Down the street there was this little restaurant that smelled like real food and old arguments. Aunt Patty ran it with an iron ladle and a sharper tongue. Her daughter Ruth did a lot of watching and a little work. And Belinda, their niece, moved through that place like a quiet song, never loud, never lazy, always noticing. She noticed me too. She saw how I always ordered plain rice, how I thanked her and kept my head low, how I never reached for the extras. One afternoon, she leaned in just enough for me to hear whispered, "Don't tell anyone," and slid a plate in front of me with a piece of meat tucked under the rice like a secret. I stared at it too long. It wasn't the meat that knocked me off balance. It was the mercy. Do you know that feeling when somebody hands you dignity when you're not sure you deserve it? I tried to refuse. She nudged the plate back and gave me that tiny look, the one that says, "Eat, I got you." Next day, same whisper. Next day, same quiet rebellion against scarcity and pride. I'm not a crier, but I'll be honest, gratitude lives close to the surface when you're choosing to be broke on purpose and someone treats you like you still matter. If it were you, what would you have done? Tell her the truth and risk blowing up the only place you feel seen, or keep the secret and say thank you with your eyes? Pattern interrupt. The kitchen door slammed. Ruth had seen the meat. You know that smile some folks get when they think they caught you dirty? Ruth wore it like jewelry. By evening, Aunt Patty stormed into the shop, dragging Belinda like a thief's apprentice. She threw a greasy rag at my boots and called me names that don't help a body grow, told me I was using her niece, told everyone within earshot that a real man doesn't let a girl feed him. The guys at Gideon's looked at me like they were waiting for a fight. I swallowed heat, said easy and plain, I never asked her for anything. That didn't calm anything down. Humiliation loves an audience, and Aunt Patty was playing to the back row. That night, the beating happened in a house that should have been safe. Not my house, hers. Uncle Ben had a belt, a cheap whiskey breath, and a kind of pride that stomps because it can. He called her useless, and worse than told her he'd marry her to Mr. Morgan, a rich, mean man twice her age with a history everybody pretended not to know. I'm not going to paint it up for you because some stories don't need decoration. That's what happens when the powerless live under people who enjoy power. They call it discipline, and the neighbors turn the radio up. Do you think that's fair? The next evening, she slipped behind the shop, where the air always smelled like rubber and rain. When our eyes met, the noise of the city thinned out. I told her soft and honest, I love you. She flinched, not because she didn't feel it, but because hope hurts when the ground isn't steady. I love you too, she whispered. Then she told me we needed to slow down. You're still learning, she said. You need to stand on your own feet. In her mind, I was just a new mechanic trying to make rent and get my timing chains right. Then my phone rang. My landlord. 3 days to pay or I was out. I shrugged like it was nothing, but she saw my face shift, and it broke something in me that she could read me that easily. That night, she did a thing that split me in half. She crept into her uncle's room, took enough money to cover my rent, and came to me early, eyes darting, voice shaking. "Take it before your landlord throws you out." For a heartbeat, I felt relief. Then, the truth stood up. "I can't take this," I said, folding her fingers back over the bills. "It's not yours." She looked like I'd slapped her, then she nodded, because even when you're drowning, stealing makes the soul heavier. She went home to put the money back. The moment she stepped through the door, the trap snapped. Uncle Ben searched her clothes, found the cash, and the belt came out again. It ended with a lock on the outside of her bedroom door and a wedding date set 3 days away. I couldn't breathe for a minute. That night I went to her window, tapped the bars, whispered her name the way you call for rain when the ground is cracking. The crying stopped. The window inched open. Her face, swollen still, herself filled the gap. "They're forcing me to marry Mr. Morgan," she said. "Tomorrow." I saw white around the edges of my vision. I wanted to rip the bars off with my hands, wanted to light that whole house until the truth showed up. But rage without a plan is just noise. I took her fingers through the bars and told her steady, "You will not marry that man, I promise." She looked at me like she was measuring the horizon for a change in the weather. "How, Henry? You don't have money, you don't have power." That was the second my decision finished forming. The experiment was over. Morning announced itself with an engine that didn't belong on that block. The car pulled up quiet and heavy. I stepped out in a suit I'd sworn off, shoes that clicked like punctuation. Ben squinted like the heat was playing tricks on his eyes. Aunt Patty and Ruth came outside with their mouths open. I walked up and said it flat, "I'm here to marry Belinda." He laughed in my face, said I borrowed the car, said I was acting big, told Aunt Patty to call the police. She did. When the officers arrived and saw me, everything shifted. Shoulders straightened. Salutes happened. "Morning, sir." Ben's smile died slow. "Why are you greeting him?" he asked, voice already shaking. The senior officer looked at him like he'd missed the obvious. "Why are we here?" Ben pointed at me like a toddler trying to give orders. "Arrest him." The officer shook his head. "No, sir. That will not happen." "Yeah, that happened. I didn't ask them to arrest him." "Could I have?" "Probably. But fear isn't justice, and I wanted more than a scare. I told Ben I'd be back with my family to do it right, and left. That led to the argument every son with a strong mother knows too well. My mother. Lady Williams, elegant iron-spined, looked me up and down like I'd tracked mud into a museum. An orphan, she said, like the syllables meant unworthy. My father, who knows when to use silence like a tool, let it sit, then asked her if she remembered who she was when he met her. Not rich, not polished, not finished. He said, "Love isn't a resume. Character is." She didn't like that. I told her I was marrying Belinda with or without her blessing. She told me I'd regret it. I said I'd take the risk. 2 days later, my father and I drove back to Ben's place with the intent to be proper. The yard was wrong empty in a way that felt staged. No Ruth sweeping, no clatter from the kitchen, no gossip drifting on the air. Ben opened the door with red eyes and a voice already shaped like pity. "Belinda is dead," he said. "We buried her this morning. I've been hit before as a kid, as a player on a field, but nothing knocked me back like those words." "She wasn't sick," I said. "How?" He shrugged tradition at me. Quick burial, no fuss. He didn't want to stress me, he said, then offered me Ruth like she was a seat filler. If your stomach just turned, you're not alone. I stared at him long enough for the house to feel colder. If I don't see Belinda by tomorrow, I said, you will regret ever knowing me. Then we left. Stick around because what happened next will blow your mind. I called the only kind of cops I respect the ones who work. An inspector I've known since we were kids didn't bother telling me to calm down. He just started moving pieces. Officers fanned out in a grid the city never sees, talking to the folks who notice everything. The gate guards, the tea sellers on corners, the taxi drivers who cover the hours other people sleep. By sundown, a security guard at an unfinished building said he'd seen two men carry a girl inside, hands tied head down. The team rolled without sirens, boots soft, eyes hard. Two men stood at the door, smoking and bragging about nothing, and then they were on the ground. Inside it was damp and dusty, the air full of concrete and fear. In the far corner there was a chair, and on that chair a girl, wrists bound, chin on her chest. An officer touched her shoulder, said, "Madam, we're here." Her eyes fluttered, and the room changed temperature. Belinda. I'm not going to make poetry out of it. Relief hit like a wave, and I had to hold the wall a second, because the only thing stronger than sudden grief is sudden grace. We cut the ropes, covered her shoulders, carried her past the men who'd been paid to erase her, and one of them started talking before the cuffs were tight. Ben paid us, he said, voice wobbling, said, make the problem go away. That's what he called her. The problem. The inspector wrote everything down like he was chiseling it into stone. We weren't done. They caught Ben, Aunt Patty, and Ruth at the bus park, trying to thread themselves into a different town. Sunglasses, small bags, big fear. Officers moved clean. Ben ran 2 steps and learned what consequence feels like. Aunt Patty fell to her knees so fast you'd think the ground pulled her down. Ruth cried and said she didn't know, and maybe she didn't. But participation isn't always an action. Sometimes it's the silence you choose. The van door slid shut, and the street went back to selling bottled drinks like evil hadn't just been escorted away. The courtroom parts of this story moved fast because the file was heavy. The kidnappers confessed. Paper trails appeared for sins older than any of us wanted to believe. Turns out Ben didn't just steal cash off a table, he stole years. From Belinda's parents before they died, from Belinda, after from anyone who believed him when he said family. The judge read the charges with a tired voice and gave a sentence long enough to make the future safe. 170 years without parole. Some people cheered. Some gasped. I just put my head in my hands and let gratitude run its course. Do you think time like that heals anything? Or does it simply warn the next man with a belt and a grudge that eyes are open now? Back home, something softer shifted. My mother sat on a couch she usually guards like it's on loan and reached for my hands with fingers that trembled. I was wrong, she said. Pride made me cruel. That girl is stronger than I am, and she loves you without asking what's in your wallet. If you've ever watched a steel door open from the inside, you know that sound. I told her I'd forgiven her a long time ago because forgiveness isn't a pass, it's a path. My father smiled like the house got larger. A week later, in a boutique where everything looked like it belonged in magazines, Ruth appeared in front of Belinda with mascara smudges and no pretense, went to her knees and asked for forgiveness without a performance. Belinda lifted her up and did the thing that makes her who she is. She let go of the poison. Come to the wedding, she said. And when I tell you, there were fresh tears in that store, believe me. The wedding felt like a sunrise had wandered indoors. I tried to look like a grown man holding it together and failed the second she stepped in wearing white that made the room go quiet. We said the vows not like it was theater, like it was a promise you planned to fight for on days when love looks like dishes and patience. You may kiss your bride, the priest said, and the sound that rose up after would have woken the dead if any had the nerve to stay asleep. My mother clapped through tears. My father stood with both hands on my shoulders like a blessing. Ruth smiled in that complicated way people do when the past is heavy and the future is finally lighter. Pattern interrupt. Now what? Here's the part fairy tales cut. After the kiss, life starts. Belinda cooks because kitchens are where she learned both pain and sanctuary, and turning that room into joy is how she wins. I still stop by the shop and change a tire for a stranger because I don't ever want to forget how it felt to be useful with nothing in my pockets. Money didn't save her. People did. A guard who spoke up, an inspector who worked neighbors who finally told the truth. And one girl who slid meat under rice because kindness is a habit you either practice or you lose. I'll be honest, some of the same folks who laughed at the broke mechanic came around later with gifts and apologies that felt like networking. We kept the door more open than closed because grace teaches better than revenge, but we learned to set lines. Does wealth create new hypocrisy or just expose the old kind? What do you think? If it were you, would you test love the way I did, strip your life down to a bus pass and a small room to see who still smiles your way, or is that just manipulation with nicer packaging? I wrestle with that. Testing love has a cost. Belinda paid some of it in bruises and tears she never should have cried. I paid mine in rage I set down every morning like a bag I'm tired of carrying. So here's the controversial part, and I want you to really answer me. Was I wrong to wait so long to reveal who I was, even if the waiting showed me what was real? Should forgiveness, like the one Belinda gave Ruth, be standard, or do some betrayals mean the door stays closed for good? And what about justice? Does 170 years actually repair anything, or do we need more than courtrooms to fix what's broken in families and neighborhoods where cruelty hides behind the word discipline? Drop your thoughts, argue respectfully, tell your own story. If you've been the Belinda in a room, the one who helps quietly and pays a price, I'm listening. Stick around for more stories told the way life actually feels. Messy, honest, with the lesson pulled out instead of painted on. If this one hit anywhere true, hit like, share it with a friend who needs hope with a spine, and subscribe so you don't miss what's next. More important, jump into the comments. Tell me where you stand on class on forgiveness, on testing love. Tell me what you would have done in my shoes. Because this channel isn't just about stories, it's about a community that refuses to look away. Thanks for being here. Thanks for believing. And until next time, take care of the people who feed you when nobody is watching. You know what I mean?